Man, Panthers kick off in 40 minutes.
Panthers kick off in 40 minutes, and we can let it rip here.
Let's go, baby.
Sunday, December 15th, around noon 30 Eastern time. Christmas is here. I'm headed back up north on Wednesday, so just getting a bunch of stuff done here. And brought in Coach Holmes. And what we're going to do, obviously, we had the press conference on Friday. It was on Friday, right? Not Thursday?
Yeah, I think it was.
On Friday, Virginia Tech announced some staff changes, talked a little bit about the bowl game. We're not going to do our season recap yet. I'll have that with Pat coming up here soon, but I feel like this warranted a conversation. Just looking back at everything. But Coach Holmes, how are you doing? Welcome back. It's been a minute.
Doing great, man. Thanks for having me on. It's awesome. It's a kind of an exciting time. I know we kind of talked about, hey, what's going to happen at the end of the year. You know, it's kind of interesting to see what has unfolded up in Blacksburg and in Merriman especially, and a lot of interesting scenarios have kind of unfolded.
That's right. That is right. So without further ado, our two haikus today. Pete McGee is the first one. Inexperience, dust settled, waters recede. Tenured teachers, please. Well done. Well done. And then the second one from Sports Politics Coffee. BRM, a hairy plight, 10 wins, eluded Tech. Bet's price, a shaven head. So some background. Beginning of the season, I was feeling great. We all were. And having a conversation with some of the boys and said if we don't win 10 games, I'll shave my head. So I did go to the barber today and cut all my hair off. So it is all gone. First time in a long time I haven't had this much hair on my head. We will be wearing a cap for a large portion of January until we get that right. But let's get started. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge two quick things. I never, ever, ever want to see coaches get fired.
Absolutely.
I have had the opportunity to talk to all three of these coaches, Coach Crook, our offensive line coach, Coach Galt, our strength and conditioning coach, and Coach Marv, defensive coordinator. They're all great dudes, and they pour a bunch into this program. College football is a very difficult, very demanding job. It is also very well compensated, and it is a results-driven business. And coming into this season and leaving the season, there's no way around it. This was a huge opportunity for Virginia Tech to take a leap forward, and looking at how the entire season played out, it was a step backwards. So it was an opportunity to take a second, canvas everything, take a look at what's going on, and ultimately the decision that came to was to let these three coaches go and look elsewhere. So Coach Holmes, just wanted to get your immediate reaction, kind of how you think about this stuff, but I did just want to put that out there before we got started.
Yeah, it's never an easy situation. You know, whenever you're put into a spot where you have to have those, and Pry has always been kind of upfront about it. You got to have those tough conversations, right? He said that up front. I think some Hokie fans have said, "Hey, why haven't you had those tough conversations sooner?" But again, there's a time and a place for everything, and again, with the shift in things like National Signing Day and the early signing period, and when all that goes down, when all that happens, I think that in meetings with Whit Babcock, and he can't make these decisions unilaterally because of contracts and things like that, and stuff that has to go through certain members of the athletic department. So understand that the meetings have to take place and stuff like that. So I think there was a timing issue, and it can't just be boom, I can make a decision and I can just lop it off at the head. So there was a timing issue, but I think those tough conversations were had, and I know it's got to be super tough for them. But you never want to see guys fired, and believe me when I say this, no coach ever gets into a job saying, I'm going to go into this season trying to screw things up as much as possible. I'm going to sabotage this season as much as I can. There's no such, like, even in the pros when they say like, oh, we're going to tank for Tua, or tank for Trevor. That never enters nobody ever does that. That is never a thing. It is So I can just say it's that never enters anybody's head. So it was always 100% effort was given, and it's usually some type of external situation or external circumstance that had arisen, whether it was injuries or something else along those lines that had led to the situations not coming out to the perceived expectations.
And my second thing coming out before we kind of break everything down was I do think that Coach Marv has a very bright future. I do think that thrusted into a very difficult position. I think that he has the personality, the attitude, and this is a learning opportunity for him ultimately. Really good experience for him to get. I think he's in his like mid to late 30s, so he's extremely young. And I'm sure all three of these coaches will learn from this. But let's talk a little bit about.
I think Billy on top of that. I think that if his first DC job would have been at a G5, I think he would have really succeeded. Like if he had gone to an East Carolina, for example, or somewhere along those lines at a G5 school, I think he really would have succeeded, or at an FCS level and been able to get his feet underneath him and been able to figure out, hey, what works best at a low pressure environment. But when you're at a place, your first DC job cannot be at a place where you're at a rebuild. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where it kind of struggled. So
let's talk a little bit about the move specifically. So this is the first time that Virginia Tech has fired a coordinator since 1992. So truly a historic and unique situation at Virginia Tech. And I think the question that everybody has been left to talk about for these last 3 or 4 weeks, because you're not going to make a move before signing day. So everybody kind of just, there's this echo chamber of opinions and everything else that gets thrown around. And it was, are we getting rid of both coordinators? Are we getting rid of one coordinator? Here's who I think should go. Are we going to get rid of anybody? And here's what I really think it boils down to for me. When you look at Bowen and you look at Marv, the totality of the team, we underachieved. However, if I'm comparing the two, I believe that the offense scored enough points in every single football contest that we played this year to win, with the exception of the Clemson game. I also think what played into it was we had a really difficult time adjusting in the second halves of games. You saw our defense fall apart in a lot of different situations where we looked great in the first half and then we're playing catch up in the second half. And we were never really able to figure that out. Our offense averaged 22.8 points per game, which is good enough for top 50. And, you know, I'm not saying one was tremendously better than the other, but that's kind of, if you're comparing the two, mm-hmm. I felt as if the offense got enough done to win more games than we did on paper. So those are my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I believe the offense did, granted, they got off to a slow start. And I think that brings into a discussion that we're going to talk about later in the pod. But I think that we had a good enough offense to be able to stay in games. Where we struggled, again, like we said, was second half defensive performance. We were good early in games on defense. We kept guys. We were in games in the first half. We were competitive in games in the first half, and especially against Vanderbilt, we let teams get out to an early lead, and then early in the season we were able to hold teams off and were able to allow our offense to be able to come back in those games. But in the and so. We did a good enough job in making those adjustments early in the season, but when in-season attrition happens, when injuries and everything else happens, and you can't let things like early points and gaffes and stuff like that really, really catch you off guard. You can't let that stuff happen. It was the second half struggles. It was the third quarter issues that everyone talks about. You can't let that stuff happen later on. And it was, I think that was really the straw that broke the camel's back at the end of the day. And it wasn't just this season. I think it was a confluence of what happened in 22, what happened in 23, what happened at the latter part of 24. And it was just a combination of all those things. And, and even though in 22, it wasn't Marv's call, Marv was a part of, he was DC in title only for the most part. And so I think that did play a massive role in all that.
A couple things and other observations from this press conference. Number one, Coach Pry said that he will not be taking over play calling responsibilities for the defense moving forward. So we will be looking for another defense coordinator. We're also 10 and a half minutes into this podcast, and I was pretty surprised. Number one, obviously, this was very difficult for Coach Pry to do. You could tell he was a little emotional at the beginning of his press conference. But one of the things that was almost hidden in this press conference was he did announce that Pop Watson and Kyron Drones would both be back for next year. Mm-hmm. Now, I do want to caveat that by saying there is another portal window in the spring where that portal is open. But from that press conference, he did announce that both would be back for next year. So I'm going to count on that being the fact. I do want to just really quickly talk about the Kyron Drones situation. Number one, I'm thrilled at the opportunity to have both of them back. I think competition is great. I think it's awesome. I think they both bring really unique skill sets to the table. We've interviewed both. I think both have a fantastic head on their shoulders. I think they both have an opportunity to be great leaders on this team. But I do want to talk specifically about Kyron's play. It's very easy to watch this season and say, man, like he's not the answer. He didn't live out. Like if we're playing blame pie for the offense and we're playing blame pie for Kyron's performances, a couple things to take note of. Our wide receiver room is very talented. They had a incredible amount of drops across the entire board.
Very disappointing.
Number one. Number two, from a confidence standpoint, Kyron Drones is a guy who was asked at the beginning of the season. I said, if we are going to run this guy into the ground, you're going to get him hurt. And he already has some trouble being in the pocket because number one, that's not his skill set. And number two, we can't block for 5 to 8 seconds to get him to get these routes to develop. So I think there was a standpoint of, I think he was banged up, tremendously banged up this year. I don't think he had tremendous confidence in his wide receivers, and it took a little while to get some chemistry. We never actually even really got to see the chemistry that we got last year after September. And lastly, I think the scheme in general was a challenge as well. When we came out in September, we were saying, hey, we're going to move the pocket around. We're going to see some of this RPO stuff. And that we didn't really see that. All of the passing attack we saw was on the sideline. You have to make a perfect throw to get to the ball to the wide receiver on the sideline. And I don't come away from this year thinking Kyron's not the answer. Kyron's not talented. We saw exactly how good Kyron can be. He didn't forget how to play football. I think there are a bunch of factors that went into him struggling this year the way that he did.
I think that's you're 100% right. What we saw was an attempt by Bowen, and it wasn't necessarily trying to revert. And I saw a lot of conversation on whether it's in our group chat or whether it's just on social media in general is like, oh, are we going back to the 22 offense or early 23 offense? And I think it was really an attempt by Bowen to try to push Kyron's boundaries a little bit. I don't think it was really trying to see how NFL ready was he. Bowen's not an idiot. I mean, he does have some NFL experience. He's granted it was at the tight ends coach level, but he's been in those meeting rooms. He does have some experience at that level where you can say, hey, these are the throws that you're going to have to be able to make. And if you can make those throws in these situations, in these windows, then you're going to be able to be NFL ready. And all things considered, at the beginning of the season, we were anticipating that Drones at the end of this year was going to go to the NFL, right? That was the perception that Drones was going to be gone after this year. He was going to go to the NFL. We were going to have to work with somebody new coming into 25. So we were hoping that was going to be his progression and development. So I don't have any problem with him really doing it. But if it wasn't working after 2 games, then maybe go back to what was working, what was our bread and butter. But we tried it a little too long, and I think that built some frustration with some Hokie fans. We also had him getting stepped on in getting run over in the Vanderbilt game and getting a little banged up. He got stepped on in the Rutgers game and getting a little banged up. And I really think what really hampered Drone's development throughout the majority of the year, and what really hurt him as far as his progression and his just production throughout the year, was I don't think he was above 85% health for a majority of the season.
Yep.
For way above the majority of the season. And he really gutted it out for a majority of the season. And so really kudos to Kyron for really toughing it out, because if a coach asks you if you can go, and you know this as a player, I'm going to tell you that I can go. That there's, I'm going to tell you 100% that I can go. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to lie to you. And if I'm 65%, I'm going to tell you that I'm 85% that I can go. And it's up to the strength and conditioning staff, and it's up to the medical staff, and it's up to the coaches to be able to determine, okay, I believe him or I don't, based on what he can do in practice and everything else. And it's up to the coaches to be able to say, okay, Pop's next guy up or Schlee's the next guy up, and we got to make sure that he's prepared and he's ready to go. So I would say that there are probably a couple of games, that we probably should have had other guys ready, and probably been able to put other guys in early, or been able to rotate a couple of guys in certain situations to maybe give Kyron a little bit of a break. Maybe you don't put him back in overtime against Vandy, in that last play, but in those certain situations. So again, you can't put the blame on Kyron. There's a lot of, we had injuries all across the offensive line all year. We're shuffling guys around there. Tootin was banged up all year. There was a lot of stuff on him. So the blame pie, I would say 25% of the blame pie on offense goes to Kyron. I mean, I think that's a legitimate amount if you're trying to say, because he did force some things at times. He did try to put a little too much on his shoulders at times. But again, I think 25% goes on offensive play calling, try to do a little bit too much. 25% goes on injuries and external things, and 25% goes on other position groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the most frustrating things in the midst of a lot of frustrating things was just the couch quarterback commentary that we saw after the UVA game. And this is not taking anything away from Pop.
No, absolutely
at all.
Thought it was a great performance.
Great against UVA, and I think that extremely admirable against Duke. And
they are a garbage program, though. That is a trash team.
Bad program, bad team. Now, my point of this is Virginia Tech is not a 10-win team simply by having a different quarterback. The issues are, it is a longer list than quarterback is the problem. So I'm excited to see both compete. I think the thing that really encouraged me, and I think speaks to maybe one of the challenges, is all year, I've seen Kyron do it before. I've seen him play with the confidence and the moxie and the hammer mentality that this team missed up until the UVA game and Pop brought to the table. I think
the Miami game,
100%. You've been calling it his flu game all year because he's been hurt. He goes out there, plays great. And that's the Kyron that we saw against Pittsburgh in 23, that we saw against, basically every game in September with the exception of that Louisville football game. So I'm excited to see them both compete. I think they bring tremendously different things to the table. And we are a better football team today with both quarterbacks on the roster. I don't think that's even remotely debatable.
Yeah.
So let's talk specifically about each group that got a facelift. We're going to talk about the defense and just a couple of things that stood out to you throughout the year that were causes for concern for you. On the defensive side of the ball, we talked about the adjustments. But what really confused me and irked me was we were not able to figure out getting the right people in the right spots. You have all spring, you have all summer, and specifically at the linebacker position, we were never able to really figure out what the best unit was to have out there. You had Brumfield, you had Lawson, Kelly Lawson, tremendous athlete, tremendous upside. has every single gift that every coach and every player would want to have from the man up above. We weren't able to kind of maximize that. Jaden Keller and Woodson's a complete baller. So that unit, we kind of were constantly shifting around, and it was an issue. We talked about gap integrity last year, Coach Holmes, when you came on a few times. So any other notes on that linebacker position?
I think we got caught into just a weird mix of being kind of genetic freaks and just a lot of youthful inexperience. You saw at the course of through the end of the year, Woodson really came on at the end of the year. Jaden Keller in spots came on really, really good at the end of the year, but was just so inconsistent. And I think that's the word to really kind of cement that linebacker room. It was just inconsistency. Because Lawson is just just straight up stud. Just an absolute stud. But where he is so great, he is your prototypical 3-4 outside linebacker, right? He is your guy that at the next level, if he gets looks at the next level, he's going to be the guy that lines up at your outside linebacker spot at the 3-4 that can go out and cover guys in the flats, and he can go out and be able to be an edge guy that can also rush the passer when need be. But if you're asking him to play inside the C gaps, he's going to get blown up by guards because he's so top heavy. He's almost like a triangle. He's kind of, he's so tall and big that he can get knocked over and pushed back easily because of his height. And so that's where, he's not necessarily like a Tremaine Edmonds. Tremaine Edmonds had a little bit more legs and hips to him, where, he had a little bit more, overall size. So I think that's the biggest difference, between a Kelly Lawson and a Tremaine Edmonds. But Jaden Keller had still kind of a little smaller guy. Woodson is still learning that position, I think, but he's coming on. But I think outside of offensive linemen, the hardest guy to get in the portal that is going to be consistent is going to be a middle linebacker type of guy. I think we saw with Brumfeld, we missed with the guy from, we never got to see him on the field, the kid from VMI, Stone Snyder. We never got to see him on the field, but when you have a Dax Hollifield type of guy, when you have a Rashard Ashby, when you have a Vince Hall, when you have a guy that can just be a block in the A gaps, that can just, that you're not going to be able to run in there. It makes such a difference in your offensive game plan that I'm not going to be able to run in there. I'm going to have to come up with some other game plan. It's such a mind job to any offensive coordinator, because I know that and every offensive coordinator, the first thing they want to do is be able to establish the run in between the guards, and if they can do that, I own you, right? That's, what is, how did Syracuse beat us, right? They beat us at the end of the game by taking number one and be able to run them through the A gaps at the end of the game. And so, so being able to have that guy that, not having that consistent force right there, and being able to force Keller, being able to force Woodson, being able to force guys like Mose Phillips, and being able to force guys in the secondary to have to think about having to come up and help, because we don't feel comfortable about what our guy in the A gap is doing. It hurts everybody else around us.
100%. And I think a good example, obviously, very different body types, but I think of Jabril Peppers at Michigan. We played together in high school, and he's 6'1", 205. He's too big to play corner. He's too small to play linebacker. And Michigan almost had to create a position for him to play in order to be as effective as he is in college, being a Heisman Trophy finalist, and then making it into the league. And in the league, you saw his best years came with the New York Giants, who were able to be really creative with him by having Landon Collins in the backfield, and then going to New England, where Bill Belichick is able to work his magic and figuring him out. So we were never able to figure out really how Kelly Lawson could maximize his skill set. And as you said, if you don't feel super confident about what's going on in front of you, you can't think about what's going on directly in front of your face. And that is why we consistently saw some of these big gaffes that leave you scratching your head. It's not always someone not understanding what their assignment is. It could be that, but it also could be, I'm not sure that the line in front of me is going to handle their assignment, and it will be on me to compensate for that.
Yeah. And you saw, and right now, I think we also have that same problem with Caleb Spencer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, our defensive guy coming in, Caleb Spencer is that Divine Diablo guy, is that Jabril Peppers guy, where he is a tweener guy, where he is a hybrid safety linebacker, where he can be literally everywhere across the field, in your secondary, and that dude is a weapon if he can be used right. Mm-hmm. And so I think whenever we end up, I know we'll talk about it in a minute, but whenever that guy comes in, man, that guy can be a special piece of the puzzle whenever he comes in.
100%. And just one last thing, I think the defensive back room, and I want to say, I think Coach Jones has done a really good job developing guys. 100%. I want to say that about the defensive back.
I hope he stays.
I absolutely do as well. I do think defensive back was another area where it took us a little while to figure out getting the right guys in the right seats. Caleb Spencer plays in Miami. It's like, oh my gosh, where's this guy been? He's been on the roster all year. Like, let's get him some more snaps. And you didn't see him have as much. His usage was kind of sporadic, I guess. Yeah. And this room, look, they were dealt a bad hand right off Jump Street. Jalen Stroman goes down game 1. And then it's like this conglomerate of Spencer, Lovett, Jones, Mose Phillips, Reddish. Like, it was just trying to figure that out. Now, I think towards the end of the year, you feel really good about Dante Lovett. Strong's going to the league. We don't know what Mansour Delane is going to do. But I think the overall feeling was, man, this is a really talented defensive group. We have a lot of ingredients to make a really good dish, and we just couldn't figure out how to put them together to do that.
Yeah. With the DB room in particular, and the thing with Spencer, is I think they initially slotted him in that star spot. I mean, how are you going to keep 7 off the field? Like, he had such a good year. Yeah. We were all worried because he was kind of hit and miss last year, and dude, he played so well this year. And so, when he needed a break, it was great to be able to put him in spots. And he came in and did really well in the Rutgers game and was able to kind of sniff some stuff out. But, as far as the DBs, though, how are you going to be able to put, and it was great that we were able to shirt Braylon Johnson. We were able to shirt, some of those younger guys and able to get those guys, a much needed shirt, and those guys are going to be able to come in next year and do really well, I believe. And then we got Braylon's kid brother that's coming in this year to be able to help out in that safety room. And I think that's one of the reasons why Mose went in the portal probably. But you got Q Reddish, who was a genetic freak, tall, lanky kid, but came in and played quality reps, did really well on special teams as well. Charlotte area kid, went to the Big I over there in Mint Hill. But I mean, the defensive backs have always been kind of something that, Virginia Tech has kind of hung their hat on, and we kind of went away from that for a long time, for a brief minute there. And, it's good to see that that's kind of been a focus of ours in recruiting and getting back to that. Because if you can shut down, that back half of the field, it really makes the defensive line and linebackers' job that much easier.
So we're going to move over to the offensive line, which I know is near and dear to both of our hearts here. So I want to point this out. Andy Bitter put this out, and it's a pretty astonishing statistic. Since 2012, our offensive line has been coached by Kurt Newsom, Jeff Grimes, Stacy Searles, Vance Weiss, Rudolph, and Crook. There are some great names on that list. Jeff Grimes, VT to LSU, is now at Wisconsin. He was at BYU for a while as well. Yep. Stacy Searles was at Texas, Virginia Tech, Miami, North Carolina, Georgia. Vance Weiss, Virginia Tech, UNLV. And then Rudolph, Virginia Tech to Notre Dame. I do want to say, I think there's been some misinformation on the internet about Rudolph. This is a fact. This is not like this is a fact. Jeff Grimes, Stacy Searles, and Rudolph, in my opinion, are 3 of the top 5 offensive linemen and coaches in the country. They're definitely in the top 8 to 10 That's
Yep.
not conjecture. They are absolutely some of the best
100%
offensive
fact.
lineman coaches in the country. And if you want to talk about Vance Weiss essentially put an entire offensive line into the NFL. If you look at each position group, who came in, who went to the NFL. So these are some really good coaches. But this year, if we're talking about this year, the group was a mess. The group was,
Yes.
it was a complete mess. And that is why I am so impressed with Bashal Tutin, or one of the reasons I'm so impressed with Bashal Tutin, because he was running around a group that you kind of knew what the offense was going to come out and do every single week. And you didn't really know who was going to be in what spot. I think, to the offense's credit, we tried to shuffle things around and find the best unit to get out there. But at the end of the day, whether it was a development problem, whether it was a schematical problem, and I think one of the other big issues is we weren't able to bring in players from the portal to supplement our offensive line issues. So that was kind of my read on the offensive line this year.
Yeah, it's the hardest position at where Virginia Tech is in the grand scheme of college football. It's the hardest position to get out of the portal.
And the most expensive.
Most expensive. And that's what I meant at our position.
Yeah.
We don't have the $20 million that the Texas and Georgia's and now Chapel Hill's, have. But listen, year over year.
I gotta hose you down, man.
year over year, right?
Yeah.
Year over year. Okay. I thought the offensive line did better.
Mm-hmm.
Year over year.
Yep.
Okay. We were able to run in the middle better than we ran in the middle last year.
Yes.
Which was a place that we wanted to improve, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody said that. We wanted to run in between the tackles better than we ran in between the tackles last year. And we did that. We wanted to tweak the run game where it wasn't just running to the outside, because we knew that running stretch was the only thing that we did well last year. And we knew that every time we ran stretch early, guess what they did? They took it away, right? They took it away early. Even UVA, as slow as they were able to take it away early. We had to be able to press the middle and be able to gash in the middle early. And so we came out. So we started utilizing the H-back, and we ran some split zone concepts, and we started running some G concepts, and we started running some trap concepts, and doing some stuff in the middle. So I think year over year, that's why I called myself in our group chat. I said I was a crook truther, right? I think for what he had in that room, I think he did really well year over year. Now, could he recruit like Pry wanted him to? No, don't think he could. And that was the biggest problem with those guys. You saw Grimes, Searles, Weiss, Rudolph, a lot of those guys. You know who whooped our ass year over year in recruiting? UVA. UVA always whooped our butt. Going all the way back to the Newsom era, UVA always whooped our butt on offensive line recruiting year over year. Like they would always get the top guys in state on the offensive line in recruiting.
Who was left after Penn State and Clemson went in, by the way, first?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so those guys. Now, some of our best offensive linemen that we put into the show, Wyatt Teller started as defensive lineman. Dwayne Brown started as tight end.
Josh Nijman started as a defensive lineman.
Josh Nijman started as defensive. So a lot of the guys that we ended up putting into the show were developed and turned into those great lines, but they weren't recruited as offensive linemen. And so I think that was always kind of the big issues, that we could not recruit offensive linemen and then develop them into pros. And so that was always kind of the big issue. Now I knew Joe Rudolph when he was, when he was at Appalachian State, because he was the offensive line coach at Appalachian State when I was working in North Carolina, and great guy too. But but man, you talk about some of the great guys that we've had. What we really just boiled down to was that we had some really good guys. We just could not turn the corner, and we just didn't have the right in between the ears mentality on the offensive line. We didn't have those. The reason why Wyatt Teller was so good was that he was just nasty.
He's a prick.
Yeah, he's just
on the field.
Just nasty. Nicest guy you could probably meet off the field.
Yep.
But on the field, you don't want anything to do with him. Jake Grove. I don't know. Jake Grove was one of the nastiest, down and dirty players you ever want to meet. And he was he was center. He was captain of the offensive line, man. He was just, and that's the type of guy that you want. And we haven't really had that guy, and you have one of those guys can help turn everybody else into that guy. And I don't know. But you got to have some of that in you a little bit already. But I mean, at the high school level, I tried to get a lot of my defensive linemen to play offensive line. I would try to get some of my linebackers to play guard for me, because I ran a lot of wing T. So we would pull our guards a lot. So they have to run a lot. And so a lot of times I would use undersized guys as my guards just to be able to get angles because it would be really quick. So they wouldn't have to push guys out of the way. Really, it would just, get a shoulder on a guy and move him out of the way real quick. So if you were 170 pounds, as long as you got him in the way real quick, that was fine. But
Coach, I want to ask you a question before you move on from this. Tell me if you agree with this statement. To your point of you can't run the ball as effectively as we did without having some nasty to you, right? But I believe that our offensive line more displayed a position blocking situation. It's almost like put your butt in the hole or, guide the guy versus just chaos. Like if you watched the 2019 Virginia Tech offensive line, or you watched the 2016 Virginia Tech offensive line, people were getting maimed at the line of scrimmage. We never saw that. There were times, especially against Boston College, where there were massive holes that our offensive line was creating. I didn't see like reckless abandon, like just chaos laying down thunder on it. It seemed very much like we were pushing and position blocking more than we were just destroying people off the line of scrimmage. We never were 2 yards past the line of scrimmage right after the snap this year.
No, it looked like we were taking people where they wanted to go.
Yes.
And a lot of times that can work for you, but a lot of times it can work to your disadvantage. And I think anytime we got a tackle for a loss or a TFL or it was any type of delay or any type of read, or there was a stunt that they were trying to work, and that's why I think, guys like, Parker Clements, unfortunately, caught a bad rap a lot of times, is that, he was taught a couple of times to kind of check and react. Yep. And then if his guy was stepping to the inside, he was kind of taught to kind of run him to the inside and kind of take him where he wants to go. Yep. And that messed up the read and ends up in a TFL. So it made him look bad, makes his grade look bad. Mm-hmm. Those guys all took a really bad rap.
Yep.
And if for anybody who reads this, or hears this online, come at me, bro. I'm gonna tell you this right now. You come at a Division I college football player for the 3 or 4 mistakes that he makes on the offensive line because they happen to stand out on significant downs. Mm-hmm. Dude, you don't look at the couple times that he puts a dude on his back. Mm-hmm. You don't see the ones where he makes a play that saves a touchdown. Right. You don't look at those because offensive linemen never get credit for what they do well. You only see the times that they screw up. Now, a guy may screw up a couple more times than others, but here's the thing. Crook knows that if there was anybody else that he could put in there consistently that was going to do a better job than 70, he would have done it. But the only guy that you probably could have was Garrett, 79. But if he puts him in there and he gets hurt, there's nobody to replace 65 who's banged up all year. So it's a catch-22. So take a deep breath.
Yeah,
folks.
I'm with you. And I think the unfortunate thing for this offensive line is a lot of the plays that when we screwed up, it happened in huge moments that were unavoidable on television. And frankly, I think, that was the problem with the unit. It was extremely frustrating, especially having the back that we had, and to get the quarterback banged up because he just didn't have the opportunity to really have a ton of time in the pocket. So,
Yep.
I don't want to beat this point to death. I want to get to the last point here. And this is something that I had been screaming from the mountaintops all year. 2 years in a row, Virginia Tech comes out.
We've talked about it.
2 years in a row, Virginia Tech comes out in September and quite frankly does not look physically prepared to play a 60-minute football game both times. Completely stumble out of the gate. And you saw it in 2023. Virginia Tech played themselves into shape over the course of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Season starts, and then we say, all right, once we get past September, we're going to be okay. Why is that? It's because the team is playing themselves into shape. We talk about the Vanderbilt game. Dudes are dropping left and right. We must have played 11 wide receivers in that football game. Dudes are cramping. Dudes are this, dudes are that. And I think the only reason we were able to fight back in that game, because both teams were just falling left and right, was we were so much deeper than they were. But it showed so obviously that we were not in the shape that we needed to be in to be where we needed to be. And I think that is the most frustrating thing, is the common theme between both of these seasons is our teams after phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 are not physically or cardiovascularly prepared to play football.
Yeah, our phase 3, whatever we call it, which is our fall preseason, has that's the period of time where where you don't want to get guys hurt. Obviously, you don't want to get guys injured, but that's where you got to get the guys cramping. That's where you got to get the guys puking. That's where you got to get the guys, that's where you got to get those guys worn out and exhausted, and get those guys in the bod pod afterwards. You got to get that. That's where you got to get that stuff happening. Now that should be your hardest practices of the year. 100. I think I'm not 100% on how many you get anymore. It used to be you got 30. I think is it 30 that you get now preseason?
I think it's 30 total practices. I don't know how they split them up. The rules change every single year.
It's changed.
It's less so every year. So
we get in high school. In high school, we got 30. So it's probably less than that. But so we got 30. So if it was 30 for us, I imagine it's probably less than that. So but in day one, obviously, you're conditioning. So you put them in pads, right? Or put them in helmets first for a couple of days. First day in helmets, what are we doing in that day? Because we've been going all summer. So fundamentals should be there. We know how to line up with all that stuff. What are we doing in those first days? We are running the absolute bejesus out of them. We are conditioning. We're doing gassers. We're just doing every type of conditioning. We're doing bear crawls. We're running hills. We're doing perfect plays. We're doing 80-yard perfect plays. We're running the play and then we're sprinting for 80 yards. We're doing 20 of those just to make sure that everybody is intact. We're doing all these certain things that seem like it's unnecessary. It seems like it's torture. And we're trying to explain to these kids after it's all over and say, listen, this is the stuff that's going to last through October 31st.
Yeah. It's not a punishment deal.
Yeah.
That's how I viewed it in high school.
Exactly. And so you're, you get out of that first practice and you're like, this coach is an asshole. He's saying, but you don't realize it until you're after the fact. You're like, okay, so now when I don't cramp week 1, because you don't realize there's a difference between practice speed and game speed. And when you're going, especially, when I was at a small school and we had a 30-man roster, and you have, 20 guys that are going both ways, and they're playing Ironman football, and they're playing, 120 snaps a game like they're Travis Hunter. Congratulations, by the way, Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
Congratulations to you, by the way. But those guys, but you don't understand the difference in that conditioning, the consistent stopping and starting and the sprinting and the toll that takes on your fast twitch muscles and everything else. And so you have to be conditioned for that. And aerobically and anaerobically, and so I just don't know. It's one thing to be strength prepared, right? And I think that, and I don't doubt our strength prepared. I mean, we never got really blown off of tackles, right? When we wrapped up on somebody, unless the guy outweighed us by 40, 50 pounds, right? We never really got blown off a tackle. But
to that point, because it kind of zags what we were saying before. And here's what I think you mean. We weren't at a disadvantage, but we weren't at a tremendous advantage. It was a net neutral in that situation.
Yes.
So I do think that our team was strong enough to compete. I don't think that our strength was a difference maker.
Yes.
That's how I view that.
Yes, I would agree. I would agree with you on that. But but at the end, if you're aerobically disadvantaged, now that does come into play. Now that does make a difference. So so again, I agree. I don't think that we were we were conditioned enough from the get-go. And it takes that 30-day window that you're talking about during practice to prepare. That 30 days, extrapolate that. Now you're getting into August or October 1, and then when we started playing better. So, instantly we're there.
Yeah, I think that was my biggest frustration is we were throwing away September. That for lack of better terms, it's exactly what happened. And it didn't matter what level of play we were playing against. I mean, Marshall weren't in shape in the Marshall game, weren't in shape in the Vanderbilt game.
We out-talented those guys.
100% out-talented them. And on the flip side, Rutgers, you can look at all of September. Every team we played in September, none of those teams were more talented than we were, for the exception of Miami. I can't remember if we played Miami at the end of September or at the beginning of October. But
and as good as Vanderbilt was, we should have beat them. Like that was
100%. So I also would be remiss if I didn't bring this up. I was very, very lucky in my time at Virginia Tech. I got to learn from Coach Gentry, who is the best, the absolute best, like a legend in this space.
I read his book. So good.
Unbelievable. And his strength conditioning program was a difference maker. That was not a net neutral thing. That it was a difference maker. It was other programs were looking and being like, what is Virginia Tech doing? We need to do that. I also want to say a lot of people were very upset after the previous regime had come to a close. And a lot of people keyed in on Coach Hilgart in that unit and saying, man, we don't know what we're doing. That's been such a disaster. That was wrong. And I just want to put that out there because I listened to it for years and years and years. He is in the playoffs. He's with Boise State.
Ashton Gentry seemed to be okay with it.
He's done a great job. Heisman front runner up. And again, we've come to the end of these three units, and we've pointed out a couple of things. Sincerely, I think it's a learning opportunity for all three of these guys. Again, college football is a results-oriented business, a very well-compensated, results-oriented business. And I hope they are all ultra successful at their next stop. Coach Galt, super young guy. Legendary, just like Coach Gentry. His dad was a legend in the strength and conditioning field as well. So I wish all of them the best. And I think it is an opportunity for us to address some issues that we have moving forward. And I didn't get to say this too. I know Coach Pry was emotional at the beginning. Like, I have to give a lot of credit to Coach Pry. Coach Marv is a guy that he coached. Yep. He's not just a guy that he brought in and said, like, I've watched your defense. Like, this is a guy he coached. This is a guy he's probably a huge mentor for Coach Marv. That had to be an extremely difficult thing for him to do. It was necessary. And I remember when I watched the press, the first thing that I sent in our group chat, I was like, man, like, I hurt for Pride because he looks tore up, because I'm sure that was a very difficult thing for him to do. So wishing all of them the very best in their next step. Real quick, just some replacement names that we're going to throw out there. Now, I do want to have a disclaimer. It's very funny how on Twitter we will say one thing, and I'm not we. Coach Holmes, you are not we. I'm saying as a whole. People will say this is my criteria for X, and then submit options that do not meet the criteria that you said are absolutely necessary. So the common theme seems to be, man, we need to get away from giving people their first opportunity to come do this. And then we'll throw out people who literally have never done the job ever. I'm not saying we need to do one thing. I'm not saying we need to do the other, but just be mindful of that. I've seen that a ton on the timeline this week.
Mm-hmm.
Here are my names. This one's not really a surprise. Anthony Poindexter, UVA background. He's the safeties coach at Penn State. Young guy, fiery guy, good recruiter. I think that he is going to be a star at some point. I would love for it to be here. I think it would be hilarious if it was here with Fontel, being that he has a UVA background too. So I like him. And a lot of people, man, this was my coach in high school. This guy's dad did play with my dad in the USFL. Chris Partridge, he's the current safeties coach with the Seahawks. He was a top 3 recruiter in America 2 years in a row. He was part of 3 top 5 defenses in the country. He was a co-defensive coordinator at Ole Miss. He learned under Don Brown. He learned under DJ Durkin. He coached with Jim Harbaugh. He coached with Lane Kiffin. I would do just about anything for him to be even considered at Virginia Tech. I think he's overly qualified for the role. But those are just the 2 names that I have in the back of my head for this. So interested to hear what you think.
All right, so I like Poindexter. Think he would be an interesting choice. One to kind of stick it to UVA a little bit. Partridge I think would be a good choice. He does have a good pedigree. Has a little bit of an NFL background. He has worked in the SEC too, which kind of brings the SEC recruiting piece into it. Does have a co-DC background, so it wouldn't be his first go around in it as well. I like Mike Houston. Mike Houston, who played linebacker at Mars Hill University with my coaching mentor, Paul Hall. So I do have
Paul Hall, the rapper?
Paul Hall. No, not Paul Wall. Paul Hall. Who was my coaching mentor in North Carolina. So shout out Paul Hall. But they were teammates at Mars Hill. He worked his way up the coaching ranks. Again, won national championship at JMU. Went on to be the head coach at East Carolina. Wasn't as successful at JMU, but great defensive mind. Obviously, with the ties to Virginia, knows Virginia really well, would have an excellent recruiting base for recruiting the footprint, not just in Virginia, but also North Carolina. Being a North Carolina native, have a great relationship in the footprint there. I think he a great defensive mind, really aggressive mindset. I think it would work really, really well. Plus, it's a kind of a redemption story. He needs to rebuild his rep after not having a so successful head coaching experience at the G5 level there. I think it would be a really good opportunity for him to kind of rebuild and regroup his rep a little bit there. Really, really good dude, really good person. So I am 100% in the Mike Houston bank right now.
Okay.
But if you're looking for guys that were that haven't really done it, but JC Price, I believe he was co-DC at one point at Marshall, but he's a guy on staff that could probably do it. Our defensive line wasn't the sharpest of our position groups this year, so to be able to bring in somebody else that could kind of fine tune that group and be able to promote JC into to more of a play calling role would probably be a little bit of a win for us there, to be able to keep his recruiting chops, to be able to advance him. The dude loves Virginia Tech. This is his school. He loves it. That's it. Absolutely. We got to keep JC on the staff. That's crucial, I believe, to us. So, but we can get into defensive line talk later. But JC Price would be a good option if we did want to keep it in house. And another guy is Daryl Tapp. Daryl Tapp is a defensive line coach under Nick Sorensen, who is also a Virginia Tech alum, who's the DC in San Francisco for the 49ers. Nick Sorensen probably wouldn't take a lateral move from NFL to college for the same role. But Daryl Tapp is a guy who would probably be one of those guys that's ready, but also doesn't have the DC experience and have the play calling experience.
Like that list. Any other ones for offensive line or strength and conditioning?
Offensive line, I know the name that's been thrown out there has been Todd Washington. He's the guy that is for the I think he's in the UFL right now. So he's a guy that's been thrown out there. He's got Dwight Vick's stamp of approval, which I know goes a long way. But again, I kind of want a guy who wants to be here. Wants to be here, who can go out and recruit kids. I don't know what his recruiting experience has been. That's going to be the biggest thing for me, because I brought it up before. What's had really killed all of our offensive line coaches in the past has been lack of ability to recruit high ability kids that are already offensive linemen and be able to develop them. So if you can do that, I don't care who you are, sell yourself on that ability, and I got you. Mm-hmm. As far as strength and conditioning, there's a guy on staff that was a freight train, one of the best of fullbacks in Virginia Tech history, played in the late 90s, early 2000s. He was Michael Vick's fullback. And his name is Jarrett Ferguson. He's already on the strength staff. He was
on the staff with Coach Gentry too.
Yes, staff with Gentry. I believe he was on staff with. No, he left under Hilgard and then came back. Right. Mm-hmm. So he is a Gentry guy. If given the reins, I believe he would tweak it enough to be able to get it to where it needs to be. Give Ferguson the ball. Let him score some touchdowns. Let's go.
Last thing, and I want to be careful with this. With this point, because I think this is so different now in the age of NIL, unfortunately. But what is so important in the strength and conditioning role is the culture setting aspect of that role. And I recall when, I was with Coach Gentry and when I was with Coach Hilgard, there was a mentality of like, if it's your off day and you're not in the weight room, people are going to know you weren't there. Like, people will know, and it's almost like a form of like public shaming that you weren't taking the opportunity to get right when you had some extra time. And it's so hard in this NIL age where if you look at somebody the wrong way, or if you talk to somebody the wrong way, you could be left in a situation where they're literally on the phone talking to their handler or somebody else about wanting to leave, which is a shame. We saw that with Cam Good. Back, who was here, transferred to UCF, had a good career after Virginia Tech, but like, we need somebody who like makes being in the weight room cool again. Like fun. That's what we have to develop, because there's a group of guys on this team, and I'm just going off of like social media. There's a group of guys on this team who you consistently see in the weight room. On off days, in the summer, in the spring, when they're injured, when they're prehabbing, whatever. And I feel like that is something that was not part of the culture of this team this year. That could be totally wrong. I'm not in the room, but at the end of the day, the conditioning of our team, the culture of our team is 100. The temperature of that room is set by your strength and conditioning coach. That is his job. And he spends more time with the team than anybody on staff. He spends more time with that is the MO. And that is the most important thing. And that's why I completely agree with you. I think Coach Ferg would be a great fit.
Yeah, I think too. I think you saw that preseason this year when you saw how when they did that thing, the ACC All Access, when they showed the receivers, when they showed the receivers working on that Omni receiver machine, the fancy jugs machine, they're out there working on the jugs machine solo rather than hanging out with the boys I mean, some of that time, weight room should be the place where granted, there's multiple places to hang out, but
sure.
Weight room should be kind of the place where you're spending some of that.
That is the players' lounge.
Yeah, that is the players' lounge.
That is the players' lounge.
Yes.
I'm totally with you. So I think that is tremendously important. And I certainly hope that lands the right way. That's in no way me saying that the team doesn't work hard. There's no way of me saying there aren't guys on the team that are motivated. I'm saying that needs to be, it needs to be the culture of the team to do that. So, any other notes on this before we move on to letters from the lunch pail, and just one other note on NIL?
The only other thing that I wanted to add, going back to the presser, was very impressed that Pry had the wherewithal to mention that he wanted to, or that he had already made contact with Bruce Arians.
Yes.
To make connections with him to reach out about how to handle roster management, how to, with revenue sharing and everything else, about how to be able to handle that. And that Arians is going to be playing a role in that going forward. They have multiple Zooms set up and established with that. I think that's really heady and mindful going forward for him. Really, really, really proud to see that that's mindful of Pry.
Completely agree. And I think to the roster management thing, before getting to letters to lunch, I wanted to mention one other thing. It was said in Witt's interview, which was really good. I encourage you all to listen to it. And it was said with Coach Pry. Kelly Woolwine is the GM of Virginia Tech football, with Triumph and everything else. He is going on Tech Sideline on Monday. Very interested to listen to it. Kelly, awesome dude, working with the Life Ring Foundation, took on a huge job. It is a huge job that there's no playbook for. There's no right way to do it. There's no wrong way to do it.
Belichick's got one.
He does have one too. You're completely learning on the fly.
Yeah.
And with Lombardi too, like that's great that he did it at the NFL. He also wasn't signing 1-year deals with 18-year-olds. So there's going to be a learning curve for everybody. Moneyball is a word that's thrown around a lot and kind of like a buzz term. It was almost like RPO 3 years ago. You remember when everybody said RPO and kind of didn't know what it meant? The reason I'm saying Moneyball is this year we went all in on the wide receiver room and bringing everybody back. And what you're going to start to see teams do is you need to start to think, how much does a replacement for this position cost versus what it costs to bring back the exact same guy? And you are going to have to make a lot of those decisions. And that's why I put out a YouTube short the other day on when everybody was entering the portal. I'm not going to freak out because I have no idea if any of these kids will come back. I have no idea who we're bringing in for it. I have no idea what these kids' demands were, or their agents' demands were, or their parents or their handlers or anything else. So if you see a tweet or you see a article or a Bleacher Report update, X player has entered the transfer portal, it's usually not just as simple as, well, they're not happy, so they're leaving. There are now a million factors that go into those decisions. So I'm not in a place, and quite frankly, with all due respect, I don't think anybody that isn't in the room is in a position to grade how this is going until we see the roster when it's finalized.
And on that point, I don't think a better example of that is Mose Phillips.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't think Mose Phillips necessarily is unhappy. He's pretty much a guaranteed starter at this point, but he knows right now that his market value is probably not any higher than it is right now. And also his position is going to be pushed by Johnson coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is Johnson is a legacy coming in. It's his brother's going to be playing, probably starting, alongside of him. It's going to be Johnson's a little bit bigger, I believe, than Mose currently is right now. So yeah, he's probably could be potentially a day one starter. That's a position where you could start day one if you pick up that position early. So again, I think that's a position where that money ball does come in. What's your drop off from a junior to an incoming freshman?
So let's see how it plays out. Highly encourage you all to tune in to TSL on Monday. And we're all learning as we go, and we'll see what this roster looks like coming up here in the future. So we'll jump into letters from the lunch pail. We'll start with Mile High Hokie, coincidentally, must be near you.
Must be.
So he has 4 questions. Number 1, do you foresee a 2 quarterback system or simply retain and develop both?
That's what I see. I'll be I'll be honest with you. I think it'll be. I think we go into the South Carolina game, to be honest with you, running a 2 quarterback system, and we ride the hot hand. It'll be. I think it'll be 2 series apiece because you can't really judge it on 1 series. I think you'll get 2 series with drones. You'll get 2 series with pop, unless the first 2 series with drones is just 80-yard touchdown, 80-yard touchdown. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like if the first 2 series with drones are just scorched earth, they'll ride the hot hand. But I think realistically, based on the performance of Virginia Tech opening games for the last decade, you'll see 2 series of drones, you'll see 2 series of pop, and then they'll ride the hot hand. Whoever seems to have the most progress, whoever the offense seems to be feeling the best, whoever Bowen seems to have the most freedom with. And I think that's what a lot of people don't feel most. What people don't take into account with 2 quarterback systems. It's what the play caller has the most freedom with. So I think we'll get into that.
I'm going to hopefully hope that's not the case, because we'll have the summer and we'll have the spring to figure out who the guy is. And if I was a gambling man, I would put my money on Kyron starting game 1. But we do have a spring and we do have a summer to figure it out. Number 2, if Bud is mentoring Quinn, could he be a viable, cheaper DC to develop players while freeing up the budget? This is a hot topic all week. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Sean Quinn was a head coach at the FCS level, so he does have that. I mean, Quinn's done a really good job developing the stars. So he's right. I believe he's a stars coach. So he's done I think he's done a really good job at that. I think there's a pretty good opportunity. If you were to bring him in, yeah, I mean that really, he obviously knows what Pry wants to do. So that's as far as budget. Yeah, you could definitely then use that extra budget to spend a little bit more money on getting a premier offensive line guy. So, you could definitely look at it that way if you're trying to save a little bit, but yeah, I mean, so again, how is a budgetary DC hire going to look in the eyes of your fan base?
Right. We answered the other 2. Is Coach Berg the best to take over strength and conditioning? He certainly has my stamp of approval. And then external candidates names revealed. We talked about a couple. Dale Kaiser. I love this question. Does it worry anyone that we are going after lower level transfers and not Power 4 guys? Number 1, football is football. With that said, a lot of it comes down to position. I think it is much easier to make the jump from FCS or Power 5 or Power 4 or Group of 5, whatever. We got way too many names. Group of 5 to Power 5 for a skill position player. You look at Bashal Tootin, you look at the wide receiver position, safety. The closer you get to the line of scrimmage is the more difficult that it gets. It's very difficult for an offensive lineman from Lehigh or JMU or Liberty to then go play for Texas, Clemson, or South Carolina. That's going to be much more difficult because the girth and development of some of the players that you're going to be playing against is just a different level.
Yes, and a lot of times when you see those cats, like I know we just offered an offensive lineman who's like 6'5", 305 from somewhere. I guarantee that kid had a late growth spurt. Like, because if that kid is 6'5", 305, there's no way he wasn't already in a P4 program. Like there's a definite reason for that. Either that or he has the slowest feet on God's green earth. So like there's so there is a reason usually for that. Like we saw with a guy like Clayton Frady, like when he got here, his feet were just really not P4 speed. That's why he wasn't able to see the field, and honestly, and we don't really know. I kind of wonder if we were, kind of hoping Montavious Cunningham was going to catch up to speed. I kind of wonder why he wasn't able to see the field a whole lot this year. He's going to be back this year. So, right now, he hadn't entered the portal again yet. So, kind of wonder what's going to happen. So we'll see. But, I agree with you 100%. Closer you get to the line of scrimmage, the harder it is to translate that skill. But you get some of those FCS guys, those lower level guys, speed is speed, hands are hands, cuts are cuts. You get it.
Last one, acidic fire. What sort of team are we going to field at the Mayo Bowl, especially with the transfers now and the NFL declared Hokies? Are we going to have enough to even put up a fight? I got to tell you, Coach, I'm going to root for our team. We should do away with other bowl games. That's going to be hyperbolic. People are not going to like that. Like, people are going to get hurt. I'm not talking about Virginia Tech only. Like, the amount of people who will be playing in roles who have not played at all and may not be prepared to play at all, protecting a quarterback or protecting a running back, I think is dangerous. Call me out if you think this is hyperbolic. Like, that's truly how I feel about it. You just saw Marshall had to opt out of their bowl game. We'll have an extended conversation about this. I don't know how you do it, but I almost wish that you were able, if you can't compensate the players for playing this bowl game and they're all going to transfer, I wish that we would bump the bowl game to be like the week 0 game for the next year. So if Virginia Tech was scheduled to play Minnesota in the bowl game, why don't you have Minnesota and Virginia Tech play each other on week 0 of the next year? I really like that concept. But the team that's on the team now earned the trip to the bowl game. I do think Virginia Tech will be able to field a team. And I think it'll be, I'm interested to watch. I have no idea who will be out there, but they have to find a way to fix this system because the playoff is going to be great. It's going to be awesome. But I don't think people are prepared for how bad everything else is going to be.
Yeah, I think you saw. One, I love that idea. By the way,
Thank you.
Making it week 0. That's phenomenal. I love that. But I think what you're gonna end up seeing is I think you're gonna see NIL and revenue share become a part of that. Is that you get like a $20,000 bonus for playing in the bowl game?
Yeah.
Some nominal bonus that year for playing and that'll stop your opt-outs.
Yep.
Hey, I get $20,000 for playing. Okay, great.
Well, not only opt-outs though, but still kids that are entering the transfer portal. That's the challenge too. Like if you're getting that bonus and you're a sophomore safety at Liberty and you're transferring, the senior Mike linebacker might not want to practice with you anymore because you're leaving the team, So
and Pry mentioned that too. Like in the press conference, he mentioned that he has had conversations not only with the kids who are leaving in the portal, the kids that are entering the draft, but also the kids that are entering in the draft that want to go play in the bowl game.
Yep.
So he's had those conversations, and the only people that he said weren't playing in the bowl game were Peebles, Power Island, and one other Felton. Okay. So the people that have declared for the draft are the only people so far that weren't playing, and no one else really has announced. So I mean, so far we can count on Tootin. So until they say no,
shocked if Tootin plays.
Yeah. So but I always kind of want to say that at this point those guys they want to show out. I mean, right now Tootin based on where he stands in the realm of running backs is probably a 4th rounder. But if he shows out in the bowl game, if he shows out in the Senior Bowl, could bump up to a second day guy. And, so he has something to work for, so I think that's a positive. So I think, you could definitely see something like that.
I would be shocked to see Tootin play. I'm not going to name guys by name, but there are some guys that if they're not playing, I wouldn't understand why they're not playing. So we'll see. Last thing, Sharky shout outs. I just want to shout out a couple of people. Number one, Travis Hunter, an absolutely unbelievable feat to do what he did this year. I think that is not a slight at Travis at Ashton Jainty. I think in any other year he probably wins it. I think it's fun that we had a couple of options here. It feels like it's kind of been predetermined every time we stepped into it. So Travis Hunter, really awesome, really good speech too. I enjoyed listening to that, and his story is pretty incredible. This is what I was going to say earlier. Everyone is freaking out about the transfer portal. Everybody was in the transfer portal for Colorado last year. Everybody thought Colorado was going to be trash coming into this year with the amount of movement that they had. Did they have two Heisman caliber players on their team? Yes, but they also portaled in an offensive line, portaled in a defense, portaled in a wide receiver group. They did a really good job. So it has been done before. Let the cards play out, and then we'll see what our roster looks like.
To Boulder, Colorado, of all places.
To Boulder, Colorado. Number 2, shout out to Navy. Out-coached Army, out-toughed Army, just really took it to them for 4 quarters. It was pretty incredible to watch. I think the over was like the obvious pick for me, but I was parlaying it with Army all over the place. I was wrong. Shout out to Jackson. Was happy to see it. And lastly, shout out to Georgia Amore. 2,000 points. Locked it up yesterday. Happy for her. And shout out to her for 2,000 points in her incredible college career. Any shout outs from you, Coach?
Hey, shout out to all the Hokies out there. Take a deep breath. I will see you guys all in Charlotte. Let's wait
go.
To get there for the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Tickets are booked. Can't wait to see all my family. Can't wait to see all the Suns out there. Hopefully there's some type of event out there. We'll see you guys all out there.
Awesome. Coach, appreciate the time. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we're looking forward to seeing you in Carolina.
Yeah, can't wait. Shout out to my awesome wife and my family. Love them to death. And go Panthers, by the way, too.
Go Thurs. See you, brother.